Today on Everyday Injustice, we have Sacramento area attorney Mark Reichel. Welcome to our show.
A pleasure to be here.
So it should be an interesting year in Sacramento, don't you think?
You know, it seems like that's accurate. It was a pretty interesting year last year. And then 2020 was really, really interesting. But I agree with you. I think it's more of a crescendo that this is really going to be the year.
So let's start with the DA's race. What are you hearing? What's your take on it so far?
Well, it's interesting. I think it's a big contrast. So the current selection by the DA's office, Thien is a really good person, is a fine gentleman and a very smart lawyer, but I think it's very clear that he plans to continue full steam ahead. Same as the last couple of administrations. It's a very law and order, tough on crime kind of approach. And, I think all the policies, all of the priorities, all of the prosecutions, gangs, guns, drugs, the same thing. It's going to be more of the same. It's going to be exactly the same, possibly even more potent. So that's what you have. I mean, that's one side. And then, of course, there's the candidate heartily support, which is Alana Matthews, is a progressive science-based candidate, because, I don't know, 100 years later in this country, we still think that tough on crime means something, when in reality, it doesn't end crime. It's just tough on criminals. It's tough on criminals, and that's it. And crime continues to go up, and, criminal activity remains the same or goes up more and more and more because the root causes of criminality are never addressed. Instead, we just keep sending more and more people to prison for longer and longer sentences, and we get more and more crime, and we keep scratching our heads saying, wow, I can't figure out why that doesn't work. The definition of insanity is going to be employed by one candidate for the DA's office in Sacramento, and then the answer to that insanity, to end that insanity, is going to be a different candidate. That's Alana Matthews, in my opinion.
So we're kind of starting to see, a pushback against some of the reforms, even though in a lot of places we haven't even seen any reforms. Are you getting that kind of sense in Sacramento, or do you feel like this is the year that there will be some reform?
I think the progressives need to push back against the pushback. Nothing ever comes easy, obviously, and it's what sells papers and what gets clicks, and what sells a lot of papers in Peoria, so to speak, is what matters. And so I don't know if there's that much pushback against the progressive approach. I mean, they're always it wasn't popular within law enforcement or the DA's ranks, or any kind of capitalist business model that looks at it. Progressive prosecution has never been popular. So it did get installed, as in several places, Los Angeles and San Francisco, and immediately all you kept hearing about was the pushback. Well, that was to be expected. It's not like people were happy with it anyway. It's like the New York Times interviewing white Trump supporters in Nebraska during the Biden, administration, saying, are you unhappy? Well, what do you think? Yeah, their answer is going to be yes, and it's no big surprise that they are. So I'm not a big believer that there's a big pushback against the progressive cause, because it wasn't even given a chance to start. So we start talking about and amplifying and discussing the pushback, like you said, before anything progressive really gets started. And it's going to take a while. So any kind of wholesale change to the criminal justice system, economically, and demographically, is going to take some real time, because it took so much time to get where we're at. So to try to reverse things and make a more free and just society is also going to take a long period of time. And it doesn't get that much time before people start tapping their fingers on the table saying, we have been waiting here for almost 6 months for this change.
So we had Alana Matthews on a few weeks ago on this show. Had a chance to talk to her a little bit. What's your sense for her?
She is an amazing candidate on her own, regardless of her cause. She's very intelligent. She's very savvy. She's very open-minded. She's very science-based. And, she's so pleasing, yet she's so firm in her resolve. She's got a great backstory. And then I am, obviously a big supporter of her cause, which is, science-based, fact-based solutions to crime. And so it is 2022, it is California, to be pretending like it's 1950s Nebraska, because we're Sacramento and we're not San Francisco or Los Angeles, doesn't sit well with me. And I thought, the definition of progress is going forward, not backward. And so, I'm a big fan of Alana's. I think she has a very good chance. And that's uniquely to her, not to the cause necessarily. I don't know if a progressive prosecutor would necessarily always win in Sacramento nowadays. Look at historically, we just keep going for the, Trump supporting Republicans like, the current DA was. And, honestly, we're selecting a Trump Republican for the DA. I don't think progressive DAs are going to win that easily, but it's attributed to Alana because she is very, I think she participates in a very big tent, and she has a very strong work ethic, and she can make people see that what she says makes sense.
And what's your sense for Anne Marie Schubert?
Well, I see she's running for the attorney. She's running for AG as an independent. I just, I don't know. I just think that a Democrat's going to win the vote-rich Southern California. Bonta may not be the most well-known or the most popular politician at all, but when it comes down to it, there are millions and millions and millions of votes in LA. And I know that, the Democrat usually is pro-labor and, gets those votes through the machine down there. And Anne Marie is going to probably run in a way on one issue, which seems to be that, she was involved in the East Area Rapist case and getting the arrest on the East Area Rapist case. And I think that's going to be something that she uses a lot. And, I don't really think, I don't think that's enough to go forward on and vote for an attorney general candidate based on that.
Well, we just ran a story on her because a judge granted their motion to basically stay the CDCR's early release for second strikers. Did you see that at all?
Yeah, I did. I actually saw that and I read that, and it's grandstanding, it's politics. I mean, that's all they, look, she's going to run on she's a politician. She's going to run on an issue, and the issue is law and order, crack down on crime, end the chaos, prosecute people, return things back to the Richard Nixon days, Ed Meese and the whole group in California. And, it's a democracy. There's a lot of people who want that, and she'll probably get a fair share of votes based on that. It's not my, I believe the facts support doing something differently if you want a better result. So, I'll disagree on the facts there and what's the best approach to solving crime. And that is clearly not the best approach. Nevertheless, there are a lot of people that will not spend the time, the focus or just the resources, their own personal time to learn that that's not the right approach, that that's not going to work. Instead, sound bites, emotions, more outrage will get them to say, that makes my mind up easy for me. That's a lot easier. My mind is now made up. She's against crime. Yeah, she's going to send the bad people away. Okay, I'm for her. And in reality, that's a sophomoric and pretty, kind of really surface, just, on top of the surface kind of approach to stopping crime or ending criminality.
Can somebody who's not a Democrat win in California anymore?
I think they can. And I think the reason is because I'm of the belief that many people just aren't as politically aware or politically concerned as they should be. And as such, they will spend a minimal amount of time thinking about, serious political issues and think, well, there's a lot of Democrats already. How about if I, cover my bases by voting over here and vote, this way for this person? I honestly think that a Republican could win in California. I don't know if you could win by going that far to the right, but I do think it's interesting that she's running as an independent and announced that she's an independent and not a Republican, which I don't know what that means, but it may prove harder for her. Who knows? But I think a Republican could win a statewide office in California if they play their cards right. And I think Newsom could have lost, but they were Newsom was very fortunate, obviously, to have Elder join the race, who was just, from Mars. And as a result, being from Mars, he wasn't able to pull it off. But it was right for a moderate Republican, a Pete Wilson type of Republican, to win it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the last, 30 years, I mean, it is interesting. When I first started becoming a voter, it was hard for Democrats to win. And then, after 1994, the only real Republican that's won statewide has been Schwarzenegger.
Mhm.
I mean, it is an interesting political transformation that's happened in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, that's true, actually. There's no dispute. I mean, that's why I think it could go back a little bit. I don't think it's ever going to go back fully. I think California is, just a different bird in the political system. But I do think I could see a Republican winning a statewide office here.
But, I mean, at the same time, we've never been able to repeal the death penalty. Affirmative action went down in flames. But then on the same ballot, Prop 20, which was Schubert's initiative to roll back Prop 47, also went down in flames. So it's kind of a bizarre dynamic there.
I wonder if I agree with you. It's interesting about the death penalty never being overturned here in California by the voters. It's very interesting. It's like the last vestige of voters trying to hold on to the past in some way. Like, well, I'm not willing to go that crazy out here. I'm still going to allow the death penalty in certain circumstances. It's also what's I think different too is the current Republican Party, because it's now the QAnon party. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, and Trump, obviously, they're calling the shots. I mean, anybody wants to tell you otherwise is full of shit, basically. I mean, it's true. I mean, they're calling the shots, and that's not that's not the Republican Party I knew. When I flirted with being a Republican in the early '80s, actually. But I mean, it's so far into zany, bizarro world that that party will never win. And that's what happened with Elder. I mean, I think Newsom was vulnerable, but people were thinking, well, maybe I'll vote against Newsom and see what the Republican Party can do. But their only real choice was Elder, who came off like, a QAnon from Mars. And so I think the Republican Party, as it's currently constituted nationwide, and if the California Republican Party continues to, kowtow and, bow down to that part of the party, they're never going to win anything big in California. I think they can win some small spots, but the only way a statewide office would go to a Republican if it was a much more moderate Republican Party.
But they had the chance. I mean, Cox from San Diego ran, and the former mayor from San Diego also ran. I mean, those guys pass for moderate these days.
I agree, but I think they're tarnished. It's a bleach that you can't, get the stain out of, is that you're still part of that party. And I think California voters identify the Republican Party right now with Trump and with the QAnon and Marjorie Greene and all these people. And if that was gone, if Trump was out of the party and the party, corrected itself and went back more, more moderate, I think those candidates would have had a better chance. I think so many people in California identify the Republican Party with the Trump group. Even Republicans.
Let's go back to Sacramento, because there are a couple more interesting dynamics. So what's your take on the police chief retiring? And I mean, was he good, bad, indifferent?
Well, what's interesting is that he did stand up to the DA and to the sheriff, to Scott Jones and to Anne Marie Schubert, at one point during the height of the unrest about certain things where, he stood up, in my opinion, for civil liberties and for civilized behavior on the part of law enforcement. And he took them on publicly and disagreed with them, which is, interesting to see. Usually they walk in lockstep because they're officers in the field are going to be shoulder to shoulder. And to see that dissension was interesting, see that conflict. I don't think you can ever point the finger too much at any leader of law enforcement, as long as the law allows them to go as broad as they want to go. So I think the laws in California, unfortunately, the laws everywhere just favor the police so wholeheartedly that you're just going to, imagine that anybody who's in that job is going to grow to the size of their limits. I think the individual officer on the street, the supervisor to the chief, if you can go this broad, you're going to go this broad. And it's just the nature of human behavior, I think. And so, I think it's in the city councils and I think it's in the legislatures that it's really important that, the police unions and the police unions and the ability to make voters think, make elected officials think that if they are in some way perceived as anti-police, they won't get reelected. I think that's like the most important part. The most important part is the laws as they are, and the laws not really encompassing real reform. There's nobody in the state legislature, when you put a really strong police reform bill, that will sign off on it, because they know when they run for re-election, the police union will have the money, will have the organization, will run the ad that say you support the rape of little kids, and you'll be thrown out of office. So there's no way you're signing off on a real reform bill. That goes through every city council and every state legislator.
Yeah, just, and Sacramento has a history of some pretty bad police incidents,
It's abhorrent how many millions and millions and millions of dollars, millions and millions and millions of dollars every year they spend, millions and millions of dollars, and there's no accountability. There's no accountability. There's no accountability. Howard Chan continues to get giant raises, and you say, Howard, I was just wondering, why do we write these giant checks out to all these poor plaintiffs that were, tremendously, damaged by excessive force? And I mean, where's the accountability? It should be zero-based budgeting. It should be, hey, look, if we've paid this much in excessive force claims this year or the last 5 years, look, if that doesn't go down in 3 years, your salary retroactively goes down. It should go the same for the police chiefs. And so, they're playing with our money. They're playing with house money. And as a result, they don't give a damn. I mean, they could care less. There's, look, it doesn't come out of the officer's paycheck. Nothing happens to them. They can do whatever the heck they want because the law allows them to go this wide. If you narrow their legal abilities down to here, they'll act within there. They'll operate within there. But as long as they're this wide through cities and through the state legislature and the laws, I'm telling you, in court decisions, they're going to just go that broad. And that broad includes excessive force.
So you're not very optimistic in terms of a new chief and making change?
I am thrilled to hear that it's a woman. It's great to have a minority originally and now to have a woman. That's a step in the right direction, obviously. That there needs to be more direction, though, because they do work for us. I mean, I think we've abandoned that thought since 9/11 and, I think in the 80s and so forth, too. We've abandoned the thought that law enforcement works for us in any way. And it's a bunker mentality on their part. It's an us versus them. I mean, it's a bunker mentality on their part. And on our part, there's a lot of people that just abdicated and said, look, oh, they don't work for us. We have to do what they say. They don't work for us and all that. So my point is, what I'm really trying to say is it doesn't matter who the police chief is in some ways, if they aren't directed as an employee, if they are not an employee, okay, of a city government that is very, very restrictive on the use of excessive force or police brutality or the violation of rights or just inhumane treatment of people in any fashion, then it doesn't matter who the police chief is, because you can have a great police chief, but if they're allowed to go, the city or the state allows them to go this wide within the law and not have a problem, their officers are going to do that, because what's the chief going to say? Look, I want you to operate within here, and the officers say, but the law allows me to go out to here. So it's kind of like, I don't know what to say. It's like having a different manager at McDonald's, for the state of California, a new regional director of McDonald's serving the same exact food. It's like, oh, we've got a female chief at McDonald's throughout the state. Well, they're going to serve the same food. So, the direction needs to be The direction really needs to be for extreme reform. I mean, extreme reform, because it's going to take so long. Gradual reform doesn't do anything. It needs to be extreme reform and give it some time, because I just think that it's become an absolute police state. They subpoena, social media records for people. They're considering about charging. They subpoena their emails, their text messages. They're not charged with a crime, but they're thinking about charging them. And then, obviously the policing is done in a completely racially disparate way. And I mean, even, in Sacramento, they prosecute Asian gangs like nobody's business, and they send a 14-year-old away for 40 years. They send a 15 or 16-year-old Asian kid away for 50 years because, he lives in a neighborhood where if he goes out his door and he doesn't do what they want, if he doesn't gang up with the guys, he's going to have the heck beat out of him. So, to go outside the door, you have to join a gang. Once you join that gang, no matter what they do, if you get rolled in on it, the Sacramento County DA's office says, that's gang case. We're tough on gangs. He's going away for 40 years. It's genocide. They don't do that with white kids, It's just, kind of silly. You could be in East Sac or, Land Park or whatever, and you and your friends are skateboarding, you decide to call yourself a group, and you start, breaking windows or breaking into houses or cars or whatever. You're not going to get charged with a gang enhancement. But, if you're 15 years old and you're in South Sac and you're Asian and you walk out, you spend a week in some gang because they make you join it. You have to join it. And then you're just a lookout for a burglary. You're a lookout for a small time drug deal or whatever. Hey man, you're a lookout for a gun deal. Hey man, that's gang activity. You're going to go to prison, and it's genocide. And so,
So who needs to crack down on this? Is it the city council, the mayor, the governor, the legislature?
I think the legislature, and that's going to be really hard to do, because everybody knows, the mother's milk of politics is money. And it's not like, people in favor of progressive causes have a lot of money. Usually the downtrodden in society are, by definition, they're downtrodden. And so, when you go to the halls of the legislature, you can see the lobbyists are, and they're never for, there's not anybody walking around saying, I'm the lobbyist for the poor people here. You've got the ACLU and so forth, and CACJ maybe, but, they're outmanned, outgunned. I mean, they're outnumbered, they're outgunned. And the city council, though, I mean, the city could honestly, if they really wanted to do something about police reform, and if they wanted to do something about the prosecution decision in Sacramento Superior Court, they could do something about the DA's office, and they could do something and make sure that the certain laws are enforced a certain way. But there has to be that desire to do it, and it's just not going to happen.
And let's talk about the sheriff. I mean, what are your thoughts on the sheriff? The sheriff is retiring as well. What does that race look like?
That's a really large department with a lot of resources and a lot of money, accountable for a large swath of real estate. But it does have the strong backing of kind of the law and order group. I mean, it doesn't really cover the urban area of Sacramento, which can be a little more progressive. And so as a result, it's got, the suburbs, which are the suburbs for a reason. People live out there for a reason. And, the reason is, as we all know. And so they live out there, they vote that way. So, I mean, it doesn't matter who the sheriff is. I know Jim Cooper's probably going to win it no matter what. But, he's an officer's officer. I mean, he's a cop's cop. And, he's not going to be for any kind of reform, because if the law allows you to go this wide, you're going to go this wide if you're employed in that area. And so there's no way the Board of Supervisors is going to be taken over by a bunch of extreme liberals who are going to say, look, we got to completely, reform the sheriff's department as far as, how they respond to crime, and how they respond to, calls, and, their use of force policy. I mean, it's disgusting to watch as a human being when you watch someone's been shot in a police use of force, and they've been shot 6 times, Stephon Clark. And, they walk up, after 5 minutes of the person bleeding out, and the first thing they do is they handcuff them. Yeah, the guy you just shot 6 times, man, you better watch out. He may bleed all over you if you don't handcuff him. I mean, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. It's a bunker mentality that's developed. That's not going to change overnight in Sacramento or anywhere. And I don't know if people want change, to be honest with you. I mean, there's people like me that want change, but I think you could get me and 13 others, and that'd be about it in a county of over 1 million people. So.
Well, it is kind of interesting. I mean, Sheriff Jones kind of pulled the same deal with the Inspector General that the LA Sheriff Villanueva did. Seemed like the Board of Supervisors down in LA were a little bit more proactive about trying to get back at him, but about the same effect. They weren't able to do anything.
Yeah, when you kick Rick Brazil out and you say you don't trust Rick Brazil, I mean, honestly, at that point, this guy has more integrity than anybody that's been in law enforcement that I'm aware of in 50 years. So when you kick Rick Brazil out and say, I don't trust this guy, he's a hatchet job, and sadly, Sacramento has been unfortunately has been a place where some horrible politics from the sheriff and the DA has taken place. There have been tragedies where people were shot and killed, and the first thing they have to say is misinformation, untrue information about how it happened, and blaming progressive causes or those who are in favor of reform. And that type of knee-jerk playground, elementary school name-calling type of argument is so unbecoming of people in these positions in a place that I love and would like to see see it become a real a real city and not just some backwater.
There's some right-wing Trump supporting sheriff win in a basically blue county.
Yeah, well, that's because I don't think people I don't know if people really pay attention enough. And I don't think people are as politically astute as I wish they were. And honestly, John McManus is one of the first go-tos to be interviewed by all of the local media on police use of force. This is a guy, I think it was 2017, said that blacks had it better before the civil rights movement. He said before the passage of the Civil Rights Act of '64. I mean, come on. I mean, this is anyway. And they go to him. Hey, let's go talk to John McManus. Former police officer, police captain or sheriff. I'm sorry, former sheriff. Sure, he's a friendly, big, nice Irish guy, and from Central casting for us. But on the other hand, I mean, it doesn't. To make the statement that he made is so far removed from facts and from reason or real political knowledge. It's like somebody's senile grandfather on the porch saying, "Oh hell, blacks used to have it much better under slavery," and they go to him and say, "Hey, there's been a shooting. Let's see what John McManus at KFBK have to say." I don't even know the guy, but I mean, I'm just watching it thinking, well, I heard him say that. How do you resurrect your career?
Well, I mean, that was pretty interesting, and you and I both worked on that one because what had happened was you were representing one of the co-defendants in the Davis picnic day incident.
I wasn't even talking about that. I was talking about something else. I saw him recently talking. I mean, they go to him all the time.
He gets up there, and Davis was going to hire him to be the investigator on that.
That's right.
And so I start Googling around, and I find this interview, and I post an article on that, and all of a sudden, like, I've never had as quick a reaction as I had when that one went up, because I think the article was up by 6, and by 12 he had stepped down from doing that. And unfortunately, they put McGregor on, who was just as bad. But
I don't know if he was great in my interviews with my client. So I mean, I don't know what the final report was, but I thought Greg Scott did a great job, and I also thought he was going to be so biased like McManus that I thought, I can't believe you're going to bring McGregor Scott in. And I was extremely impressed with how he handled my client and the relationship with my client, the interview and the report on what happened with my client. I never saw the final report.
Saw the final report. So
I think it's because Davis buried it, actually.
Davis buried the report, yeah. And then what happened was they hired what's his name, Michael Giannacco, as the independent police auditor, and he did like the synopsis of it, which kind of buried the cops in that case. So it ended up okay, but
I think McGregor, as far what I saw happening, I was really impressed with McGregor Scott's independence and his open-mindedness and willingness to let the chips fall where they may. He did a factual investigation, and from what I was observing, I was like, well, this is a great independent investigation, especially in light of the fact I forgot about that he had replaced John McManus.
yeah,
You know, and I mean, it's just, that's Sacramento. I mean, you know, honestly, you know, I'm pretty sure Anne Marie Schubert in 2016 voted for Trump too, and so you have a Trump DA and a Trump sheriff, and you know, look, probably the most significant thing to me that speaks the loudest about the state of affairs in America is January 6th a year ago. Okay, I mean, they really were trying to violently overthrow the government, no matter how you want to spin it. I mean, they invaded the Capitol to prevent the other person from being elected the president by you know, they were by force. So if there were anybody in law enforcement out there, I mean, we need this. Come on, that's treason. Look, it is treason. So it's treason. It's what it is. It's actually treason. You can't violently overthrow a democratically elected government in America. So, you know, Scott Jones was asked, were any of your officers out there? And he refused to participate, other than that the officers only had were within their First Amendment rights, obviously. And, you know, just everybody in the media and everybody in Sacramento just walked away from it. Oh, well, we asked him, what are you talking about? Were any of your deputy sheriffs out there? Because if they are, their mental health, they're not qualified to be in. Look, you're not allowed to walk down the street with a gun loaded for a good reason, right? Except one person is allowed to, police officer. And the police officer is allowed to shoot, okay? And all they have to have is reasonable cause, and what a reasonable person thinks. In worst case scenario, it's, you know, to lose a job. Worst case scenario, voluntary manslaughter, whatever. So they're the only ones that get to have this loaded weapon walking down the street in a free society, right? And so we asked this person, hey, you know, anybody employed in your department, are they a complete wingnut? Completely divorced from reality? And were they out there exhibiting clearly, you know, come on, man, no effing mental health to be allowed to walk around as one of the few people licensed to carry a firearm? And he says, well, there were a few that were out there. Again, they were within their First Amendment rights. It's like, you know, come on, man, seriously. You want to talk about walking down? I mean, literally, the police state comes to America through the ballot box.
yeah. Well, I really worry about what happens next time, because it was almost like a dry run.
Yeah, they've got it set up to, they've got, obviously, as you know, they're no fools. It's not that hard. If you really care, if you really, really care about something and you tend to it, and you put a lot of resources into it and time into it, you'll be more successful than the other side. And the QAnon part now has taken over, and they've gone everywhere in every state, and they've taken over the lowest level election officials. They've taken over the jobs for, you know, school boards. They've taken over the jobs for, you know, those who certify the elections, those who count the ballots. So they're, you know, kind of like, you know, this massive, like, you know, Hitler mobilization. I mean, they've gone small for a reason. And so my point is, I think that if they win the House in 2022, in 2024, Trump just says he's announced he's going to run. He doesn't even have to campaign. He has to wait for November for everybody he's got in all the states to just, you know, certify him as the winner. And I mean, Trump, if the QAnon group takes over the House in 2022, I believe that Trump could announce he's going to run in 2024 and not bother campaigning, not have a debate, not do anything, because in November, I mean, they'll just certify the results for him and he'll be dictator again, you know. And the rest of the party is so afraid of this cult of personality for some reason that, you know, other than Liz Cheney, and she'll probably be hung up publicly and executed at that point, along with any other Republicans that dare, you know, to speak out. I have a very, 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 very concerned view of the facts as they're developing. And it's kind of like it's kind of like while America slept. I mean, I just think, you know, we're sleeping, and, you know, some people are, you know, crying about it to everyone. Hey, look what's going on. But on the other hand, you know, that's not enough. So
Yeah. So kind of last question. I mean, you're in the courts all the time in Sacramento. What do you see there? I mean, are you concerned about what you're seeing? Hopeful?
I think that if I thought if Miss Matthews wins the DA's office, I think she's going to apply more science-based approach, factual-based approach to making Sacramento much safer for everyone, for everybody, and make it a much better place. And that's the hard thing to do, and it's a lot of work, but she's definitely up to the task. If she doesn't win, you're just going to see the same old as before, with probably worse, bigger, harder sentences, less fairness, less justice. You're going to see a lot of, officer-involved shootings that don't get prosecuted, and you're going to see a lot of the gap between, those who feel they're part of the fabric of a community and those who think that they should be the ones making all the decisions is going to get bigger and bigger, in my opinion. And it's not something I'd like to see. We can do better.
Well, thanks for coming on and sharing your thoughts.
Welcome to my messy home back office that I'm in tonight.
This has been Everyday Injustice. We've been talking with Mark Reichel, an attorney in Sacramento, about pretty much all things Sacramento. This has been Everyday Injustice. I'm your host, David Greenwald, and join us again next time for more tales from the injustice system.